and the funding attached to it. So I say it all to say that every day is a change. Y'all are reading the newspaper, and I spent the last 2 days telling reporters no comment, because I know no more than reading the newspaper than the next one, and I'm not gonna make a public comment about something or a board of governors member while I'm speculating. But these are interesting and changing times. But I think we need to make sure that we continue to do what we do, make sure we push for shared governance, and make sure that when decisions are made with selecting chancellors and presidents, that we are active participants beyond just the job description, but interviewing and help decide who the next leaders are of the system and the campuses. So I don't want to talk the whole time. If there's any questions or anything I can answer, I would be happy to do so.
David. Any questions from the Senate? Hey, there are no questions. David, I can't thank you enough for your leadership. So David has really done a wonderful job really building strong relationships with the Board of Governors, also with the members of the legislature. So David, I like that picture. It kind of reflects the cool, calm, professional demeanor of Professor Green. So, but thank you very much. Actually, we do have a question. Let's see. Let's get. Can we get that mic there? 1 second. From a familiar face, you'll recognize.
Hello,
her.
David. This is Andrea.
Andrea, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
In these uncertain times, as you said, what are the kinds of things that we could do as faculty at our local campuses, either working with or independently around our own governance structure to be a positive force, or to suggestions for developing relationships? So really my question is, how do we not be immobilized while we're in this period of transition as faculty on our local campuses?
Well, thank you for that, Andrea. My response is being advocates for your campus and identifying resources that are needed. It's never clear to me that the members of the Board of Governors and the legislators really have a feel for what occurs day to day. And too many of them perceive it as kind of running a business. And they may push for a policy or recommendation in terms of credit hours or withdrawals, anything on the academic side, and not realize, all right, tied to that, if you're pushing for a graduation rate, you're pushing for a retention rate, we need to look at what are the skill set that our students have coming in, and what are the resources that we need to make sure that we are retaining and the students are graduating. Does it mean more folks in our wellness? Does it mean more folks in writing departments? Does it need more security? Helping them have a better understanding of the larger picture. Faculty, obviously, we do much more than teach. The teaching is probably the easiest part of our job in the classroom. It's dealing with the generation of students and their needs and the resources that are attached to that. We probably spend more time counseling students on non-academic issues as we spend talking to them about academic issues. I don't think legislators and members of the Board of Governors appreciate that when they decide on budget priorities and what it takes. We look at what's going on with the NC Promise. One hand, people say, that's a great idea. We're going to have reduced tuition, but where's the other money coming for to make sure that if you're going to have more students at Elizabeth City, Western Carolina, or Pembroke, what about the instructional support that's needed? What about the writing centers? What about the other resources? I just don't think the policymakers know what that means and have a clear appreciation for the resources attached. And to me, the first thing is request a meeting with your liaison, ask to go to a meeting, and just say, I'm an additional resource. Have you decided what's needed? I'm an additional person you can call and give you insight as to how we assure student success and what's the resources attached to that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, David. And we appreciate, again, you giving us your time. Obviously, if anyone has any other questions, let me know or feel free to reach out to David. Thank you much.
Definitely. I
All right,
appreciate
take
it.
care.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker, a good friend of mine, Wade Mackey. So pull up his slides real fast. I have to. Actually, yeah, pull up the slide deck, the general slide deck for my slide deck. Yeah, I gotta share a cute puppy picture. So the first picture was we took at the reception with Dr. Roper. But I think the best picture is he raises and trains dogs and puppies. And so I probably spent too much time watching his cute videos, but those are a picture of his a recent litter you can see in August. Pretty awesome way. All right.
I'm like, that looks familiar. Where'd you get that? Good to be here. Spending 6 years among you and now moving on to faculty assembly. A couple of things I want to say about the faculty assembly. Is that? Oh, am I on the slides? Okay. Maybe show me the tech. That's not me. Where am I?
Oh, is it up? Okay.
It's not controlled here.
Yeah, I will
Okay.
get it for you.
So the first thing that I learned about the difference between faculty senate, which is sort of legislative open meeting, and faculty assembly is faculty assembly's advisory to the president. And so our meetings are not subject to open records. We are often told, do not take photos of the slides. And the comments that I'll be making are based on the official minutes. And sort of that's because it's advisory and we have very frank conversations there. And so to preserve that, not everything, information is a little more limited in what we put out there. I wanted to say that David Green is doing a great job, and my interactions with him, he's expressed that there's a real opportunity. You heard him say today that there's a lot of non-motion going on there. And sort of if the Board of Governors and others aren't taking a lot of action, he has said to me that he believes there's a great opportunity for faculty to actually get out front and maybe find some way of getting something done. So I would encourage you as a Senate, if there's some issue that you think maybe would improve things here for faculty, for students, it would be great to push it up our direction. Okay, that's me, and I just slide. Also, one of the things I observed was going up there is just how much of what you encounter originates there. It wasn't clear when I sat where you are now how much things that you think it's a local issue, but it's really being driven by something at system. And so what I'm going to try to do today is just give you a brief overview of some of the things that we've been hearing. And with that being said, there's the presidential search. They're not using a search firm. The committee includes 7 Board of Governors members. There's been a formal request by David Green to include faculty, staff, and student voices. He's optimistic about that, but we have no further details other than the interim president will not apply. I don't know if you can see it there, but there is a web link, www.northcarolina.edu/presidential search, so you can get the official word there. When we talked last with the interim president, he talked about the prioritizing of faculty salaries in his budget requests. A couple of things that go along with that. One, they really don't understand us, right? And sort of if I could describe it, you think you use the word, they think of us as, think of things as things need to be run as a business. And so when they look at that model, faculty are overpaid and underworked. But part of that is if you don't understand the work that faculty do, it looks very different to you. And if you don't understand the full range of salaries, you just know some top numbers, you don't fully understand what the issue is. And he, as David Green is also, or excuse me, the system president has also advised us that what would be most helpful would be to have small groups of faculty do outreach to their local delegation, to the faculty, to the General Assembly. That sort of, so that they get to know you, get to know your issues, get to hear from you, would be the most effective way of making change. He also talked about Board of Trustee training. This is new, and this is something that they've realized that just because you get appointed to a board, you may not know everything you should know for the role you have. And so they've implemented this. The Senate chairs through the Faculty Assembly have asked to be connected with that effort. And so I know Anthony's going to be reaching out with our board here to try to be involved. That's a great relationship to have, being able to go directly to the Board of Trustees. He's a believer, the president, that every institution has a unique mission, and he's spending a lot of his remaining time trying to prioritize educating them, I'll use that word, educating them, informing them on just how different each institution is. While we have to move forward as a system, that has to be informed with our differences. There's a lot of concern about campus administrative turnover. We talk a lot in Faculty Assembly about various chancellor searches and others. There's a lot of say, non-information that people have. My impression is that how we've handled things here have actually been a lot better than what I've seen elsewhere in terms of actual information and so forth. And health and wellness, and you're gonna hear me say that a couple of times, but he totally understands exactly what kind of impact that's having on our campuses. We heard from the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Chief Academic Officer. And you're gonna hear a few of these things later today. The peer institution study, that's gonna be talked about a little bit later today. The point I wanted to hit hard was the projected decline in traditional student pipeline. And I'm reading from our official minutes here so I can get this right. The system currently has a strong 18 to 24-year-old pipeline of North Carolina students that is projected to decline by 2/3 over the next 10 years. Say that part again, that the number of 18 to 24-year-olds coming to the system is projected to decline by 2/3 over the next 10 years. The end result is the system has to decide how to address the shortfall. Will we compete with one another, revisit out-of-state enrollment caps, increase distance education, increased adult learners, focus more on retraining? We're going to be competing a lot directly with the large private online institutions that have a lot of resources and a high touch. There's talk of considering how to change how we do business. And what goes under that was mentioned was the idea of flexible term scheduling, shorter term courses, more flexibility with teaching loads. I don't have any more information on that than that, but when I heard that, that struck me as something that we should all be thinking about if we're looking at a large decrease in one of our traditional student pipelines. She also talked about online learning system support, and they've been working on this for 3 years, and the gist is they've realized that rather than try and centralize things or get involved in degrees, they want to focus on the infrastructure and to move really quickly on getting the infrastructure to support the campuses and the campuses offering of online degrees. Moving on, we heard from the Vice President of Student Affairs, and the primary topic was mental health and wellness. And there's a small team. I think she was working with 4 people, and they're looking at training faculty to identify distress. What are the support programs we have? Policies, including re-entry for how you bring students back after they've resolved a crisis, and then to assess the effectiveness of those things. Along with that, our chair mentioned that, what was that? He was talking about the issue of collegiality and civility of communication amongst faculty, and that the Faculty Welfare Committee, this has been referred to, that he wanted to see some standards and guidelines for the creation of something along those lines. I don't have more information than that, but that's something else we're paying attention to. But by and large, the mental health issue is the #1 thing that we talk about. The Student Success Committee that I'm serving on, that was, we did a survey and everyone's top issue was student mental health. So this is something you're going to be hearing more of. Let's see, that takes me to Jim. And digital learning, we heard from 3 different faculty fellows. My first point to you is they have faculty fellows that just focus on things, and they were doing digital learning. And one of them was looking at the issue of system-wide licenses, the idea of, can we leverage all of our campuses to get a better deal on technology? One's doing work on faculty development, trying to find better ways to give faculty the tools they need to succeed. And another looking at technology and a shared services model. So I think with that, rather than go any more, I will just see if you have any questions, anything you'd like me to elaborate on. It's a national trend for what, so there's a population demographic beyond that wasn't elaborated on. I see one over here, over there. Well, the phrasing was 2/3 projected over 10 years. But that's, again, we don't have any further detail on that, but that's certainly not, that's a trend. My message to I think everyone is that that's a trend. If it's there, we need to start planning for it now and finding ways to address it and to work on expanding those other options like adult learners, like online programs, et cetera. Jean? It sounds like you're really ahead on thinking on this. That has not come up. We were really hearing just about the future trends and about what what the system is looking to address it. There was no discussion of, I think you're getting sort of this downsizing question in that. Yes.
I hate to keep harping on this, but so this is a national trend that 18 to 24-year-olds are not going to college anymore, or
There
are
are
they going
fewer
to
of
online
them.
university? What's going on? Birth rate.
There are
Okay.
fewer of them.
Got it.
So we've had a boom, and we're seeing that taper off, and that's why, I mean, one of the facts that I learned that I was really surprised by from our admissions people is this year about 2 in 5 of our new students were transfers. And that's expected to be probably half in the not too distant future. So we really need, as faculties, to think beyond just 18-year-olds coming in with 0 credits and start saying, how are we serving distant students, older students, people who are returning, people who are transferring, and how can we attract them here rather than somewhere else? I think that's part of the message here. Other questions? Anthony, anything I didn't mention that we should? Yeah. So, when you meet with, I guess I don't want to identify whom, but when they talk about their understanding of faculty, and then they say, yeah, I saw one of them was a neighbor and they were mowing their lawn on a Tuesday late morning. So clearly they're not working hard. I mean, these misconceptions are all over the place. And we've also talked a lot about what happens if you don't value faculty. So the president, the system folks get it. I mean, there are allies in this. And the place that often gets referred to is Wisconsin. What happens when a legislature doesn't fund adequately and protect the university? Well, it becomes a giant pile of gold that everyone else sails up and loots. And what you see in Wisconsin is all these people leaving and going to other states, and that it takes a long time, decades perhaps, to rebuild programs once you let your top people go because you didn't value them. And this feeds back into the sort of the positive there is that this is about getting in rooms with local representatives who have an interest in you because you're constituents and saying, this is who I am, this is what I do. I mean, I would love to have some of these folks, just follow us around for a day. Come to the meetings, look at the problems, hear what we hear from students and how we work with them and how that can take a whole day just trying to help a couple of students resolve some issues. Thank you.
I did want to also point out that if anyone has any concerns or ideas, we always visit the faculty assembly in Chapel Hill once a month. So please reach out to Wade or myself or Andrea because we do meet with the other Senate chairs and also Kim every month. So great ideas are important. I think kind of building on what Wade said, we have to get ahead of this. And I think that certainly faculty teaching loads and how faculty teach are going to be a big part of this. And so it's one of those situations where I think we should go ahead and define what we want to see happen as opposed to allow it just to happen to us. So anyway, thank you. Thanks, Wade. All right, so our next topic is always the fun one. So we have Alan Boyette and also Norman Chu to talk to us about proposed tuition and fee increase.
Hi, my name is Norman. I'm from the chemistry department. I'm the new chair for our budget committee. So the committee members make up by a faculty member from each of the major units. Our first duty for this round of semester is to look at the proposal for our tuition increase in the next years. And so I'm here to report that every members in the committee approved the proposal. And then on top of that, I believe the tuition and fees committee has also approved the proposal. And I will let you hear the details from Alan, who has been in charge of the proposal the whole time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me to join you to talk about tuition and fees. The committee, in fact, just slides up. Okay. The committee benefits from significant representation from the Faculty Senate. And so, in fact, Anthony is a member, as is Norm. Well, I guess one seat's been shared between Norman and Christine Fisher in their transition in the budget committee chairmanship. Also, David Wyrick, who's the faculty athletic representative. Clyde Derrick, Graduate Student Association president, is on our committee as well. And I was thinking Hunter, oh, there you are. Hunter Martin, Student Government Association Vice President, is also a committee member. The largest single group of members of this committee, in fact, are students, both undergraduate and graduate students. The slides that I have here, it's a condensed set of slides used at 2 campus forums that we've already presented. We had one Monday night and then one yesterday afternoon. Faculty senators were at both of those sessions, in fact. I don't really have time to go through all of these, but I wanted to highlight just a few things that we talked about in the forums and in fact that have already been now recommended to the chancellor, okay? These are the things that we talked about in those forums. I'm not going to spend much time defining tuition and fees for you. I think all of you have a pretty good grasp of what we're talking about here. We'll talk a little bit about the guidance from state legislature and the Board of Governors, talk about what we looked at as a committee, and finally show you what has been proposed this year. I will say quickly, tuition basically supports all things academic, those things that support students in their pursuit of an academic degree, to include support mechanisms that may be administrative in nature, but there's a clear tie to the degree pursuit of a student here. In contrast, these are very specific in nature and they address a variety of things probably most easily understood when looking at the types of fees that we have. So the fee types are general fees, activities, athletics, the E&T fee, health fee, security fee, and a student government fee that frankly was mandated by the system, and all campuses charge that. Finally, basically the mortgage that we have to pay on various student-serving buildings on campus. There are other fees, but these last category, that's outside of the charge of the committee. They're not things that we considered. I'm going to put a series of slides up and just leave them there for a moment for you to look at to get a sense of the types of things that these fees by category support across the campus. The largest by far in terms of its variety is student activities fee. So basically this is all student organizations that receive funding through student government across the campus. Most of these are housed within student affairs, but there are a number of activities also in Division of Business Affairs that are funded through this fee. I'm having to look around the corner to see what you're seeing. It's not quite the same image on my laptop here. Finally, I'll mention though, two items also in academic affairs, our FM radio station, as well as the Performing Arts Series. The athletics fee is pretty obvious, supports our Division I athletics program. And I should note, it's partial support. As you know, the athletics program also raises money and they charge a fee for tickets for their events. Education and technology fee is really two fees in one. The education piece is what comes to the provost, and it helps us to help your deans in providing equipment and supplies for your classes. Technology piece helps to support our wired and wireless networks, computing labs, tech support in general for students. The UNCG is fortunate, and our students are fortunate in that we have a fairly robust student health service with a wide array of services offered to our students. Pausing for tech support here. Anthony, you know any good jokes?
I think we're doing just fine right now.
Okay, all right. I'm not doing that, I promise. I don't think it was that big an issue. We can continue the way we were. I just noticed it's sort of over the top of the slide. That's fine. That's fine. Okay, moving ahead. Facilities fee, here are examples of some of the structures that have been built to serve students on campus, and the cost of the mortgage essentially that we take out to build those buildings is met by the fee. I would point out that, as it notes in the bottom there, facilities where we raise revenue, dining halls, parking structures, residence halls, that's not fee supported. There's a user fee. You pay rent to live in the dorm, you buy your meals, et cetera. In the same way, students aren't paying for the academic classroom buildings. That's an obligation of the state. And so the taxpayers of North Carolina, either through appropriations or through a bond referendum, pay for all of our classroom buildings. The security fee is covered, and that was a mandate from the Board of Governors, and that was established, if you think back to some things happening nationally in the 2015-16 era with violence on college campuses. This was mandated from one end of the state to the other, and it's been a very good, I think, investment for the safety of our students. Okay, so what kind of guidance did we get from the legislature and the board? This is really significant. I think you're probably aware of this. If you are not, let me just spend a minute telling you about the North Carolina tuition guarantee. Basically, for all resident undergraduate students, the rate you are asked to pay when you come to a UNC system institution is the guaranteed rate you will pay for your 4 or 5 year program, as long as you stay in good academic status and are continuously enrolled through that. Just think about that. That's an incredible benefit for North Carolina residents pursuing an undergraduate degree. Keep in mind, I focused on resident or in-state undergraduates. It doesn't apply to non-residents nor to graduate students. So those are the populations that could be subject to a tuition increase. So therefore, the majority of our students, since the great majority of our students are resident undergraduates, never see a tuition increase once they get here. And in fact, you should be aware, we haven't had a tuition increase for any population here in the last 2 years. Guidance is different for non-residents and graduate students. I won't read this to you, but basically we're to charge market rates and work on maintaining excellence of graduate programs. Non-resident students, in the perspective of our legislature, aren't to benefit from the appropriation, but to pay the full cost of a quality education. Okay, so let's move from tuition to student fees. Unlike the tuition guarantee, fees are charged to all students and any increase applies to all students. So the guidance from General Assembly is that we are subject to a cap of 3% on general student fees. And you can see again the types of fees that the Board of Governors has applied that cap to. So the things that we looked at as a committee, we've already talked about the guidance from the legislature, from the Board of Governors. I'm going to show you some information that's pretty consistent year to year about how affordable UNCG is in comparison to the nation and in fact the state as well. We also looked at indebtedness. Of course, student debt upon leaving college is a major issue nationally for us. And then we'll talk about needs that could be met, all right? I want to point out in this slide, you can read it yourself, but look at the figure 11,120. That's the appropriate comparison figure for a doctoral institution like UNCG. That's 2018-19 data. So that would compare to what we charge here of $73.31. That's tuition and fees. Clearly, we are a bargain in a national context. Made more so by the fact that we haven't changed tuition rates over the last 2 years. This is a busy slide. There's a lot on it, so I apologize if you can't see it. But this compares UNCG's tuition and fee rates for undergraduates in-state, out-of-state, and graduate students in-state, out-of-state to our current UNC system-approved national peer institutions. Julia's going to talk to you later about the study underway to give us a new set of peers, but those are our comparators at present. Can't walk away from the mic. Do you need, are we recording here? Gosh, I wish I'd known this at the start. This is much easier. So obviously we're here in the gold band. The number represents ranking in terms of level of cost. So for resident undergraduates, we are the 14th most expensive of the 16 institutions, or in other words, the second least expensive for resident undergraduates. Skip a column there and go over for resident graduate students. The state clearly treats its residents very well. We are 16th out of 16, the cost for graduate students who are in-state. And we're somewhat in the middle of the pack, 7th and 9th in cost of the 16 for non-resident undergraduates and non-resident graduate students. Again, this is our UNC system approved, basically given to us, set of national public peer institutions. And you're going to hear more about that. Yeah, we tend to argue that there are significant differences in this set, but there are enough similar things that it's a reasonable comparator group. As indicated, this is going to change, and we've been asking to change our peers for many years, and the system has just recently indicated they're willing to open an initiative to do that. And every institution in the UNC system has an approved set of national peers like this. So this now is the list you're familiar with if you know the UNC system. Frankly, I don't think this is a very good comparison, but we're asked every year to compare ourselves to the system as a whole. The reason I don't think it's a great comparison is that in terms of our mission, we have very little in common with the majority of the schools on this list. And missions are very closely tied to cost of operations and in turn cost of attendance. And so we are the fourth most expensive in the system for resident undergraduates, sixth for non-resident undergraduates, fourth for resident graduates, and fifth for non-resident graduate students. In my mind, that kind of makes sense. You know, we are the third of the original UNC system institutions. For the longest time, we were the only institution in our category, being not the old Research One institutions, but a doctoral research university. Later, that category grew, and so I'm going to compare us later on other factors to East Carolina, UNC Charlotte, and NC A&T, which are in the same peer set that we are, as not the Research One institutions, Chapel Hill and NC State, but that next tier. All right, so if you can see through the gray shading, average debt of students graduating from UNC system peer institutions. UNCG there is in the gold. This is average student debt upon graduation. We're at just about 27,000. The national average is 28,565 or 85. I can't read that well. The other three blue bars there, all slightly higher than UNCG's total, are the other three institutions in our peer set in the UNC system, Charlotte, A&T, and East Carolina. Nobody wants to have any significant student debt, but in a comparative sense, it seems that we're managing at least as well or better than the nation and, in fact, our peer institutions in the UNC system in terms of student debt. Advancing. Okay, so a parallel metric often looked at when you're thinking about student debt is the loan default rates at institutions, because this can create significant challenges for students. The green is a national average, 10.1 loan default rate as a percentage. We're in the gold, and this is comparing the system as a whole again. You can see we're right in the middle of the pack there. 6.4. Talk about what the proposals are. So the proposal that has gone forward to the chancellor is for a 3% tuition increase for all eligible students. For all eligible students is important because of the tuition guarantee we talked about earlier. Any resident undergraduate at UNCG today will not see any change. That's the majority of our students. So what that refers to then is a 3% increase for non-resident undergraduates, graduate students, and new freshmen and transfers who enter in 2020-21. We are not talking about a significant sum of money in a comparative sense here. $754,000 is a lot of money to me. That's less than 0.7% of the $101+ million in tuition revenue brought in every year. Yeah, Ian.
First year, and then the second year, when a second cohort comes in and starts paying the additional of that is the increase is 50,000.
Yes.
Okay. So after 4 years or so, we reach the total increase in revenue we'd be getting, and then it flattens off.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. We would project on an annual basis based on all cohorts paying this rate.
This is when all cohorts are paying it.
That's
So we
right.
don't see that increase the first year it's in effect.
We would, based on the next year's new freshmen and all of our current graduate and non-resident students.
See that the first year,
Yes.
and more again the second year.
No, because those ones continuing undergrads aren't going to pay any more. They're still going to pay that. We'd only see more in another year if we increase tuition again.
But a new cohort comes in that are now paying the new rate.
Yeah, oh, yes. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
So is this based on? Is this number based on what we would see, say we increase the tuition next year? This is based on what we would see next year, but 4 years down the road, it's going to be a lot more because those students who came in would have graduated. Do we know how much it's going to go up over the next 4 years?
I haven't seen that figure. I don't know
Okay.
what that number is. Answer that for me. Okay. The proposal sent forward emphasizes trying to fund things that this sum of money could actually make an impact with, okay? There are a lot of things this university and every university does that are very cost intensive. When you got $754,000, think about what is significant that is among our priorities that we could really do something important with. What is proposed to the chancellor is spending more than half the money on a variety of student support, student success programs. And I promised my colleague in the back of the room, Andrew Hamilton, to call on him if you want to talk about what these are. But let me just say in brief, we're talking about doing a better job in academic advising, creating a testing center that we've never had before, providing better supplemental instruction, the things that are proven to help our students in terms of student success, retention, graduation. Second piece, if you think about the increase being applied to graduate students, a number of our graduate students are on tuition waivers. When we say waive in the UNC system, it's not waving a wand and the cost goes away. The bill has to be paid. And so those tuition waivers represent real money. It would cost us $211,000 to build those waivers up across the institution to cover the cost of the new tuition rate. And so that's the second recommendation. And finally, if you keep up with the news, you are aware that the legislature hasn't been funding salary increases of late. And in fact, this was a gap year budgetarily where we didn't see our budget grow at all. Nonetheless, we have a commitment to providing salary increases for our faculty who are promoted or receive tenure each cycle. Estimated cost of that for the most recent cycle is $155,000. And so that's the last piece of this that we're recommending using these funds for, to have a permanent source for that adjustment. Yes. Any projection? Andrew, do you want to try to tackle that?
Hey, everybody, thanks for this. The short answer is we don't really know, but the longer answer is that these funds are being deployed very strategically. So we know, for instance, that we have a lot of courses that have large freshman enrollments that have high DFW rates. So the plan is to work very closely with those students and the faculty that support them to lower those DFW rates, because we know that in a lot of those cases, that's the main stumbling block for freshman students, just for instance. So we don't, I would be I would be making it up if I attached a particular retention outcome to dollars spent this way, just because this is not that kind of exact science. But how we chose to do this work had a lot to do with existing strategic initiatives around raising retention rates and raising six-year graduation rates that respect a lot of things we know about how to do this from the national literature.
To the earlier question about the impact on retention, I agree wholeheartedly with Andrew that we're not able to model the precise impact. But in the spirit of transparency, I think it's important to also note that the largest share of the funds under student success will be deployed to hire additional advisors. We are far below the threshold of advisor to student ratios in many of our units on campus. And the literature is very clear that poor advising is one of the key drivers of student retention and student success. So while we will be using some of the resources for the kinds of mechanisms Andrew described, I believe well over half of the funds generated will add advisors both in academic units and centrally in offices like the Students First Office, and a transfer advisor, hearkening back to the point Wade made earlier about the dramatic increase we're seeing in transfer students who have many complex issues in terms of their need for advisement.
You're showing numbers that were crunched from the proposed tuition increase and how we expect to spend it, maybe priorities and whatnot. But we also just heard from Wade about how student enrollment's expected to go down in the next 10 years, right? So how much is that going to offset these numbers that we're seeing?
You know, we will certainly adjust all budgets across the university if we see that kind of a enrollment decline, and that's just a.
I mean, I heard 2/3 decline in one major group. That's a huge chunk of money right there.
But please keep in mind, we are an enrollment-funded institution. So if our enrollment declines, our budget will reduce proportionately. So, you know, the estimates you see here are based on steady state enrollment going forward. If our FTE enrollment and credit hour production dips, then the funding we receive both through tuition and state appropriation will go down proportionately as well. So that's important to keep in mind.
The point I was going to make, though, it's not just going to affect these. It's going to affect anything we're funding today. We're going to have to look at a lot of things to reduce the budgets if enrollment declines.
Is it going to put much of a dent in our needs and something like that?
Well, it is a small sum. That's absolutely true. Michael.
You produced, Dana, you know, and it says student support $571,000. This is from the stuff you gave to the. This is not in the packet here. This is from back at the beginning of the semester. So that 571 from the enrollment change for 2019, 2020, is that just continuation funding for that, or is that a shift of money to student support?
I don't have the details with me, so I can't respond precisely without that information, but I can get you a detailed answer. But in general, no, it's not just continuation funding. Those funds were used for an array of initiatives that included technology purchase in support of student success, some of the automated platforms that we use. I believe there was some portion for advising. There were supplemental instruction increases. But I'll get you more detail.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to get a general sense of, so that was an additional 571K for that student support. And then this is 378 more. I'm just trying to understand the numbers.
Correct.
Right,
And
okay.
keep in mind that over the time, we've seen dramatic growth in our student population, despite what we may see over the 10 years ahead, so.
Well, and just a quick Google, I mean, U.S. News and World Report says after 2015, a 15% decline. I don't know where 67 is coming from, but that sounds like a lot to me. But, so.
Wade's comment got my attention. I hadn't seen that before either. I was surprised by that level of drop. So I'm going to follow up with you and learn more about that. And in fact, you know, we're fortunate in the Southeast and Southwest are predicted to have the least level of decline across the country, but nonetheless decline. Okay. All right, so the student fee proposals. Now remember, tuition, there is some flexibility in where it goes. The fees are targeted by the various fee types that we talked about. The proposal is a 2.69% increase in general fees. This equates to $77 a year for each full-time student, rate increasing from $28.66 to $29.43. There's a lot on the slide I'll let you look at for a moment, but this shows where the increased revenue would go. Each fee category on the left column, the amount of the proposed increase by fee category, new rate per fee, and the total revenue going to these. Here we're talking about $1.1 million. Earlier in Wade's comments, he was talking about mental health as a significant issue. Beyond some mandates, and you'll see that across all the fee categories, you know, if the state puts in place some sort of a SHRA salary increase or EHRA and mandates it, the regulations of the state are that whatever your funding source is for the position, that same source must be used for a salary increase. So if you're in a fee-supported position, we have to have fees for increases. That's budgeted within most of these categories. And there's inflation. Beyond that, though, the two items going to the student health category, a staff psychologist, we know we are somewhat below the expected ratios in terms of mental health professionals to a student population of our size, and the drug and alcohol abuse prevention program, Spartan Recovery. I go through these others pretty quickly. 10 minutes over our time as we are. So these are the proposed uses in athletics, the education side of the E&T fee, the technology side of the fee, student activities fee, and the security fee. This is the last slide. So if this proposal is adopted, the chancellor will send forward his recommendations to the Board of Trustees. These are recommendations from the committee to him. If these recommendations were implemented, this chart shows what the new rates would be and percentage increase by type of students, resident and non-resident undergraduates, resident and non-resident graduate students. In the day, in terms of both tuition and fees, we're looking at an increase between 2.84 and 2.94%. Look at the in-state resident, 7613, and remember our benchmark from 2018-19 among public doctoral universities nationally was 11,120, I think it was. Anthony, are these slides available electronically? So you have all of these slides. If you have any questions, you want to talk about any aspect of it, I welcome you to follow up with me or Norman at any time. But thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate, Alan, all of your work and clearly articulating the amount and also where the fees are going. And Norman, thank you for you and your committee's work as well. So, all right. So the next group of speakers, and just when you thought general education was going to go away, it is not. And affectionately, President Alexander Hamilton, or actually Andrew Hamilton. When I was first learning his name, I would call him that. But gentlemen, if you would come up. What we have now is essentially the subcommittee. So the proposal, the policy, the resolution that we adopted formed a subcommittee, and Aaron and Andrew are going to talk about that. Also, I'd ask Andrew to introduce himself, since this is his inaugural visit with us formally. So, but
you want to go first, or should I? Oh, hi, welcome. Last time I was here, I was crying, so this is a different setting for me. We're moving forward with the general education revision, and what we're doing right now is trying to, first thing is fill out the standing committee. Now, the standing committee is really going to be a permanent standing committee that's going to help with the implementation process. We know there's going to be bumps. We know there's going to be some issues. So this standing committee will really help with the implementation process of it. We're right now trying to find a chair for that standing committee and get the membership in there. Also, we're trying to fill out the 11 subcommittees, and these 11 subcommittees will have a very narrow focus. They're going to be working on the 11 competencies to really flesh out the final SLOs and the rubrics for each of them. So that's going to be looking for content experts. We're reaching out. We're trying to get the content experts in each of these competencies to form these subcommittees, and then we start moving forward with actually getting into the nitty-gritty and the dirt of all that. So that's where we are right now. And I want to really emphasize that the implementation, that's his bailiwick. The curriculum, that's us. So if you want the experts with these subcommittees and on these standing committees, we need your input. We can only suggest names, but we have a very finite list. So if you know someone in your department, in your unit, or you yourself wish to be on some of these subcommittees, et cetera, you have to let myself or another member of general education know so we can solicit them and reach out to them. This has to be a faculty-driven process, obviously. It's going to be our curriculum, so we have to develop it with our expertise. That makes sense to everybody? So please email me, reach out to Lynn Wyrick on general education. You can email, I think it's gened@uncg.edu, whatever the generic email is. And one of us will respond to you. But that's where we are from our next step moving forward. And we're just trying to flesh out those committees right now.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrew Hamilton. I'm Associate Vice Provost for Student Success and Dean of Undergraduate Studies. And the Dean of Undergraduate Studies part means that I get to have oversight of the general education program once it's fully formed. So one of the reasons I'm working so closely with Aaron and the general education committee and the implementation standing committee, subcommittee of that committee, is that we want to make sure that we don't design and build something that either can't be implemented or can't be measured or assessed. So I want to say that I felt a little bit guilty about eating the Gen Ed cake because you all took 3 years baking that cake, but I did it anyway and it was delicious. So thanks for that. Just by way of introduction, I came here from a role as Associate Dean for Student Success in the College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics at the University of Houston, a large public school in Houston, which is in Texas. And I was sitting where you're sitting and having to deal with people who wear suits, who were giving us things that were hard for us to deal with. So I'm just going to promise that we're not going to do that. We're going to do the best we can to make sure that the program we're offering our students makes sense to them, that they're not surprised by trying to make the old Gen Ed talk to the new Gen Ed when they're trying to graduate. And also another significant piece of the implementation is we're working very hard to make sure that our community college partners can figure out what's going on so that they can properly advise their students about what general education courses are likely to transfer here unproblematically. So unless there are questions, I will go to the back of the room and drink more coffee. Google knows all. Oh, should I talk about this demographic thing? Because I know a lot about this. So, yeah, my picture's better than yours.
And this came up, the first charge of the standing committee is actually to develop a brand. We're going to be rebranding this program because we're really trying to make a clean cut. So there's no more confusion between general education, the markers, the categories, et cetera. So that's going to be the first task that this standing committee is going to do, is how do we sell, show how important this program is going to be to our students, to the faculty, to our stakeholders. So that's going to be the first thing we have to do. And where did you find that picture of me? Just so you know, that is a wonderful picture from our coaching internship at the American Hebrew Academy last year, where I coached track before they closed their doors. But that is actually American Hebrew Academy, and those are two of our students, Dr. Deanne Brooks. So that's a good picture too. That's the last track meet of American Hebrew history. So.
Aaron, go get a big slice of cake, please. Yeah. All right. Next is our Associate Vice Chancellor for Strategy and Policy, Julia Jackson Newsom, who's going to be talking about the peer institution study. This is happening at all the different 17 institutions.
Afternoon. Okay, sorry. I was like, what is going on? Okay, this will, thank you. I wanted to take just a couple of minutes before I start talking about the peer institution study, actually to address a couple things that were said earlier related to conversations with our legislators. And just wanted to, first of all, remind everybody that we have a very talented state legislative liaison on our campus, Andrew Cagle. He is always willing and happy to meet with people. He has his ear to the ground, has very good relationships with folks in Raleigh. And I do want you to know that there's a network of them, and between them, for many of the campuses in the system, they do have as much as you can know, and sometimes you just don't and can't know because things are done behind closed doors. But when they get word of things, they're very good and very active, and routinely come back to the campuses and ask questions, ask for data, alert us if there are things coming that they are concerned about, and coordinate with the system office so that they can provide as much support as possible. But again, his name is Andrew Cagle. Please email him if you have questions. He is always happy to meet with folks. The other thing I wanted to just issue a little bit of caution about is that as private citizens, you are all perfectly welcome to meet with your local representatives, to go down to Raleigh to meet with people. But the only people who can speak on behalf of the university are the people who are officially authorized and designated to do that. So that's one thing. And typically that's the chancellor, it's Andrew, it's the provost. And I do want to say, if I have any political scientists in the room, it is politics, and it is a dance. And there's a lot of strategy that goes into who we talk with, what we talk with them about. We do routinely get legislators on campus, and we're very strategic about what we show them when they're here. We try to put our best foot forward. But I would just ask that you remember that, because there is a strategy, I promise you. Sometimes the strategy actually is to be relatively quiet on an issue. So just if you ever have any questions, please let me know or let Andrew know. And often we are happy to discuss the issue with you, and we can give you some insight into what's actually going on with any given conversation behind the scenes. So On to the peer study. So the last time that that the system did a peer institution study was in 2011. And the list that you see here, and this was flashed before you earlier, those are our current UNC system peers, and I believe is Wilmington now. Is that officially happened? UNC Wilmington is now officially one of our system peers as well. And those were our aspirant peers, so the peers that we hoped to emulate. And then this is the list of our national peers as determined in 2011. Previous to the 2011 list, there was a list in 2006. The Board of Governors is officially the group that has to approve our list of peer institutions. The folks at the system office are managing the process and staffing the process. We actually do have a pretty specific process that's been put into place. Every campus has been asked to identify a point person, and the provost asked me to serve in that position, and a working group. And we have a working group. We have met, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what this process is going to look like and how it's going to be a little bit different this time. So I've talked about authority. One of the things with peer institutions is that they are used for different purposes. And one thing I want to emphasize is that these are peer institutions at the university level. So they're not going to necessarily make sense for each of you within your school or your department because they have to be done on a 30,000 foot view. Once we get through the university peer institution process, the provost has expressed interest, and I think the chancellor as well, in asking the different schools and colleges to engage in a similar process for themselves, because sometimes that can be more meaningful for you when it's more contextualized and individualized in what you do. Common purpose that these get used for, just practically speaking, workload issues, workload comparisons, space utilization, salary ranges, other issues related to finance like tuition and fees, and student success metrics. So those are just some examples at a high level of how peer institutions are sometimes used. The process. So the last time the process was, I think, a little bit less structured than it's going to be this time. If you Google the literature, there's actually a very robust literature on choosing peer institutions. And there are a variety of methods for doing this. And the method that the system office, I believe, has chosen right now for my stats folks in the room is a cluster analysis, which is essentially a technique where you put a group of variables in and you look to see how the organizations cluster around similarities and differences in those different variables. This will be an iterative process. So the system is actually going to run the data. The variables that will be put into the analysis will come from the IPEDS database, and will likely include things like FTE for 12-month enrollment, percent of part-time students, of course, things like the highest degree offered, the number of students receiving master's degrees, number of students receiving doctoral degrees, instructional expenditures, operational revenue per FTE, percent of high cost degrees. So as you all know, we have some degrees that are more expensive than others. Percent of Pell recipients, 6-year graduation rate, and the percent of our students that are undergraduate versus graduate. And that's just an example of the kinds of data that will go into these analysis. We, from a timeline perspective, they ask campuses for some just very general input about what are the kinds of things, variables that we think are important to be in this process. What are we hoping to get out of our peer list? And so Alan mentioned earlier that in recent years, our peer list has not necessarily been as helpful for us as an institution in some of the ways that, that we would like to use it. In January or February, we should be receiving the initial lists from the system office. And at the same time, we're kind of doing our own analysis here to see what we think would be reasonable lists. And my guess is that they're going to converge fairly closely. And then we will have the opportunity to provide feedback to say, you know, this seems odd to us for this reason. Or we think maybe this variable needs to be added in because all of them seem to be missing the mark in one way or another. Once we arrive at an agreed upon list, it will go, they're hoping, to the Board of Governors for approval in the middle of the spring semester. So a couple things that are also going to be different this time around. We will have fewer. This is our current list is a long list. They want to get down to 8 to 10. And partly, I think that makes a lot of sense because the more that you have, the more variance you're going to get between us and those institutions. They want us to be thinking in a 5-year timeline because things change. We were just talking about demographic shifts coming, which I think is reasonable. And all of ours will be public institutions. Some of the universities in our system, like Chapel Hill, may also have a list of private peers, but ours will be public. There's one more thing I was going to say, and I have completely lost it. Okay, it will come back to me or not. I'm sorry. So that's kind of, that's where we are. I don't think there's any secretness behind any of this. We will be continuing to share information as we get it, as we get our lists. We'll be pulling the group, the working group together to review it and make sure that it makes sense for us as an institution. Does anybody have any questions? All right.
Corresponding with this, the system is also creating a HR database. And so my understanding is what we're doing with the peer institutions along with that database, which will be looking more at zip code, will be extremely important. So as we've mentioned before, as Julia mentioned too, when we get the list, if you have peer institution ideas, names, thoughts, please share them with us, because certainly once that list is presented, we'll have a chance to revise that list if we can justify it. So, all right. So the next item on the agenda is I've invited the staff leadership to introduce themselves as well as present their priorities. I think that ultimately we will be most effective if we collaborate with mutual interests in terms of the priorities of the campus. So with that being said, if you want to pull up the slide deck again too, that just introduces them. Perfect, right. Worked hard to get these photos, so yes, come on up. Thank you.
On behalf of the staff of the university, thank you for allowing us to come and to present today. I'm Adam Horton. I'm co-chair of the Staff Senate for 2019-2020.
Carmichael Motley, also Staff Senate co-chair.
So we have some, well, I guess our priorities I'll have up here in a moment, but priorities that the staff have. These are just some of the things that tend to be reoccurring, things that we continually revisit and are reminded of. These are in no sort of particular order, but the first one being career development, advancement, promotion, as well as succession planning, retention are issues that we hear from many staff across campus, especially in places where it's not so clear how you can move up levels within your department and your area. Sometimes it will require staff to move other places on campus or to other universities in order to continue to advance in their career. So it's an issue that we're trying to address as well. Work-life balance tends to be something that probably you all are concerned about as well as in your role as faculty, but being able to balance the demands that we have with families and also our career and being able to have some flexibility in that. And so some of these things are available to staff who have certain positions on campus, but not all staff. And so trying to be more equitable in the ways in which this kind of work-life balance can happen for many more staff. The third thing we have here is supervisor support. And we have staff, obviously, who work in all areas of the university in various jobs and sort of every corner and every area and every office of the university. And so a wide range of requirements and duties and skills and things that people do across campus. And so some are fortunate to work in places where they get lots of supervisor support for things like professional development and being able to use the community service hours that we are all allotted as staff to be able to go out and to do community service throughout the year. But the reality is there are some staff on campus that do not have that sort of support from their supervisors. And so we are trying to advocate more for that so that the staff will be able to have these opportunities afforded to them and be able to take advantage of these things. And ultimately, even, professional development, especially to be able to increase their skills and abilities to be able to move up and to progress in their career as well. The fourth item here, working to create more collaborative opportunities and open lines of communication between various groups on campus. So I think as Anthony alluded to, we would definitely love to be able to find additional ways to partner with faculty on things. And I know we have a lot of common interests and we're all sort of in this together as a university. And so finding more opportunities to do that, to have dialogue and to work together on some common goals would be a priority of ours. And then within the staff as a whole, we have sort of different groups within the staff body as a whole. And so there tends to be sort of silos even within the staff. And so finding ways to break down those barriers among staff. The establishment of a benefits committee to be able to negotiate certain benefits that we do have the opportunity to do. And so that is an issue that we are currently discussing and definitely would be something that we would like to partner with faculty on to be able to have that additional support, to be able to have opportunities for a change in benefits, not necessarily our health insurance, because that's not something that we have control over, unfortunately, but other benefits that we all have, like dental insurance, vision insurance, these things that we could come together and negotiate and possibly get better coverage for us and those sort of benefits. The desire for an ombudsman is an issue that we have kind of returned to time and time again. We get a lot of issues that are brought to our attention from staff where it may be a supervisor and a supervisee disagreement and trying to find a neutral third party to be able to negotiate the disagreement. And so, this is a continual issue that we have been aware of for some time, and we're trying to see what we might be able to do in order to have a position like that, whether that's someone who represents just this university or a shared position amongst other universities within the area, especially part of the UNC system. Adverse weather policy and more campus flexibility. Obviously, for many of us, the changes in adverse weather policy over the last few years have been harder to navigate. Staff, especially those who work positions that require them to be here on campus, as well as being able to make up time. So for many staff, especially SHRA employees, they're being required to take leave in order to cover this time when we're required to be away from campus. And so just some additional flexibility, and obviously this is a bigger issue that pertains to all state employees and all of us who work in the UNC system too. So, and then lastly, sort of elimination of more paper-based processes on campus. A lot of the jobs that staff have across campus are part of these paper-based processes that could be moved to more electronic processes and help to create efficiencies and even help people to grow in their sort of skill within their responsibility and their role. And so things like electronic forms and workflows and ways to make processes more efficient than having a printed out piece of paper that has to be moved from one place to another across campus and have various signatures. So this is another kind of topic that we are interested in seeing some development on. So, anything you want to add, Kisha?
Oh, no. Okay. Also, so all of you know that the staff Senate meetings are open, so anyone is invited to attend so that you can hear about various issues and things that we are discussing in our meetings that staff are bringing to the forefront to work on their behalf. Those meetings are every second Thursday from 10 to noon in this very room.
Any questions from anyone? We think, question, yes.
Interested in what you have in mind for collaborative opportunities and open lines of communication. What is the staff discussing that they need for better faculty-staff communication or common efforts? First thing comes to my mind is sustainability and getting rid of all that paper and trying to get all the damn projectors turned off in our buildings, right? Are you talking about anything in particular we should know about? That's kind of great.
No, a lot of things that you mentioned, but a lot of it is just so that the staff know what's going on with the faculty know what's going on with the staff, so that we can continue to support one another in those initiatives that are important to both halves. So us supporting one another going forward gives a more impactful meaning to everything moving forward.
Question over here, yes.
Could you say a bit more about the your desire for the ombuds position? So, for example, do you have is this just an idea, or do you have a proposal? I know this has come up before, so there may be multiple proposals. Where are you in exploring that?
I mean, there has been a proposal in the past, and right now it's sort of a table discussion, and so it's I'm not really sure exactly where we stand at the moment, but it's definitely something that we continue to bring up, and we want to see at least some sort of solution to have an ombudsman, or at least some sort of neutral third party that can represent. Can be, a staff member can comfortably come to and share what's going on, and then whoever they're having a disagreement or situation with can also sort of have that.
When I'm asking about that, I've had some faculty comment that they would also like, and this is not new, this ombuds position. So I'm expressing an interest, at least myself. I don't know what the Senate, faculty Senate thinks about this, but
there are some of our sister institutions do have this position on their campus. NC State, I was recently at the staff assembly meeting in Chapel Hill, and I had a conversation with their representatives, and the impact of this individual on their campus has been amazing for both faculty and staff. So we're really interested in definitely getting someone in place for that.
So I'm the chapter president of AAUP here at UNCG, which is a group that represents faculty and shared governance and that kind of thing. And we end up getting a lot of people come to us as sort of a third party for faculty issues that would go to an ombuds person. And, there's a lot of interest, I think, among faculty for doing this. And we had the presentation, and it's going to cost X amount. Okay, end of discussion. I'm wondering if maybe the faculty senate could take this as an issue and let's make a proposal, vote we want it, and just keep voting we want it and see if something will happen. I mean, once you tried out 400 grand or whatever it was going to cost, end of discussion. But why can't we push for it?
Right. Very good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
And I just wanted to echo, actually, there are most of those issues we are aligned with. Right now, the Senate chairs across the system have a massive matrix, which we're basically comparing and contrasting our resources and also our existing policy. So there's a lot of definitely cross-sectionality going on where, as they had mentioned, there are several institutions that do have an ombudsperson, so they have an existing policy and salary and everything. So we are definitely in the works. And on top of that, we are having sushi on Friday. And most importantly, I do want to talk to them about their top priorities and how we can work together. So thanks for your time there. We are going to shift from UGA to GA due to a last minute change. Perfect. So Derek, thank you so much for joining us, sir. And Derek has some slides, I believe, as well.
All for this. How's everyone doing? Is it all right if I call everyone friends today? Friends, is that okay? Yes. So good day, friends, faculty, and administrators. I'm always excited to come and be a part of something that I've never been a part of. I was really looking forward to the president of SGA to give a talk because I was going to follow after her because I never done this before, but it's all right. When Dr. Chow had asked me to give a brief 10-minute talk, I was like, yeah, let's just do something, throw something together. And then I came in this room and I seen professors I know, like Dr. Reddick, Dr. Chu. I seen Dean Burke in the back, Vice Chancellor Terry Shelton in the back, and then Provost Dunn. I got really nervous, really nervous. So, but like my advisors always said, always be ready to just talk about GSA. And I live and breathe for graduate students. I'm a graduate student. But before I get heavily into this talk, I just want to get some participation. I believe in participation and getting active, using our limbs, right, to make sure the blood is flowing. How many of us were an undergraduate student before? If you can raise your hand. Oh, yes, I see a lot of hands. How many of us were a graduate student before? Oh my goodness, I see the same hands, yes. And I really love seeing the same hands because I'm sure that we all remember our undergraduate experiences and we all remember our graduate experiences, right? And how different they were. As an undergraduate, we were basically catered to and we was offered so many opportunities, which was phenomenal. As graduate students, we are offered the same particular resources, but sometimes we don't know that they're there because we are stuck in one building. I know in the chemistry department, I'm always stuck in the beautiful Sullivan building on the 4th floor where it's extremely cold in the lab, but it's fine. I'm got one more year to go. I'm gonna chuck through it, right? But I remember that. And one of the main priorities for the Graduate Student Association is being able to break out of the silos of being in just one building and kind of embracing this idea of collegiality, like going to, like if I go to a dance recital, I want to be able to support my MFA or MA students recitals in the dance. So, and I want to be able to connect with them. And I'm sure if I talk some big science words, like I use liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry to find different molecules that MRSA presents, a lot of you all will be a little lost as to what I'm actually doing. But if I say that I have a bag of Skittles and I'm using some type of instrumentation to separate the colors and how many of that same color that I have, to understand the makeup of the bag of Skittles, you could connect a little more because it's something sweet, which is very good to me, right? So it's just being able to know how to communicate with one another. And that's one thing, as president of GSA, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but that's one thing that I push really hard for, is making sure that we first connect with one another and are able to be a support system to one another. And then the hardest, not the hardest part, but in one way that we have been doing this is by just having a GSA social. I talked with Dean Burke about this earlier this year, and just to have a GSA social, and that has been, we've done this 3 times and we have gotten near 150 to 200 graduate students attending these types of events. And that's a really big deal for graduate students from different departments to come together and be in one room or pack one room out. So that's one thing that has been really successful. And another thing is graduate students love free food. I thought that undergraduates love free food, but I really love free food as well. So they're gonna come out if there's free food and like lemonade and tea, nothing alcoholic, but lemonade and tea or water to drink. So we always have to make sure we are using all of our resources to get graduate students here and make sure that they are participating. Now, another thing is graduate students want to feel included in everything that we do. We talk so much of diversity, which I am so thankful for, and I feel very privileged to be able to call a university home that embraces the idea of diversity. But I still feel that we have just a little bit more to do on inclusion. And a lot of times when we think of inclusion, we think about the LGBTQIA plus community. We think about different religious communities. We think about the color of one's skin or race, but we often can kind of broaden that up a little bit more and think about how are we making how are we implementing the inclusion of graduate students in our everyday conversation? When we say students, are we being intentional to say graduate students to get them to show up to different events? How are we supporting them? Are we including them in conversations about different GA changes or course changes that could be happening? So it's just about including graduate students in that particular conversation. That is how we foster this idea of inclusion and just help graduate students feel more included. And I promise you, by doing this, I promise you, like, graduate students are going to show up if you ask questions, if they feel included, just as undergraduates do. So I try to foster that. And a few things that when Dr. Chow had asked me to come, I said, I'm just going to reach out to a few graduate students just to see how they are feeling, like how is graduate student life here at UNCG. And I told them to be completely raw and be completely honest with me, and I'll filter it later. Because I want to know how these graduate students are actually feeling. And I promise you, they aren't saying anything bad. It's nothing. Absolutely, it's nothing bad. But one thing that was concerning to me is graduate students and students with disabilities is like being included in every community that they're in. I spoke to someone who wasn't able to walk at a particular time, and she said it would be nice if somebody would look at me when I'm rolling up on the side of the sidewalk instead of getting on their phone just to avoid conversation. That's not inclusion at all. That's a form of exclusion. So we have to be very intentional to speak to individuals and just to make note of it that it, like, a disability doesn't have to be seen, but we have to just saying, how are you doing is a form of inclusion. So making sure that we are very adamant about that. Another thing is we want to collaborate with you all. We don't mind collaborating. So we, as the Graduate Student Association, we are happy to collaborate with you all. So whatever it is that you all have on the docket that we can help support, we are happy to do. And one last thing, we have just kicked off the National Graduate Student Appreciation Week here at UNCG. Last year was our first year. It was a big success, and we definitely look forward to collaborating with faculty in this next week. It's going to be held the same week as the Graduate Research Expo. So feel free to drop by. We'll be sharing events here shortly. So if there's anything that GSA can do for you or help to foster that community, we are happy to do so. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Are you hearing any things about graduate instructors and their relationships with faculty? What do faculty need to hear from graduate instructors that, you know, they might be a little reticent to communicate?
Yes,
as well as TAs.
Yes, I did hear something from graduate instructors. One from graduate students, I'm sorry about that. But one thing graduate students want to feel is some type of sense of care. In a sense, like you actually care about my degree, you actually care that I am successful, and they want some form of mentorship, whether it's in class, out of class, or even from their faculty research mentor. So having this sense of, I want to be where the faculty is one day, how do I get there outside of it? Yes. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, it's part of the way there. I also had to just in mind some practical things about inclusion in curriculum meetings or having to do with the instructional pedagogy that's happening from faculty to graduate instructors.
Yes, so last year.
Enough, or just sort of, hey, you're my TA, just go do it, right?
Yeah, so last year when this was presented to the Student Government Association, I had the opportunity to be in the presence. And one thing that I asked is, did you talk to graduate students? How have graduate students been involved in that? And it kind of stumped them, and I was from the presenters, and they said they would think on it. So that meant a lot to me, but it just proves that we do have to be intentional about making sure that our voices are heard. And it's not just from the faculty side, but it's also graduate students, making sure we are making ourselves available and forming community.
I didn't realize how dynamic Derek was. It's always hard at the end of the meeting to be as energetic as he is. So thank you so much for doing that. I also wanted to put a plug in for our online students. So I don't know, how much you've had a chance to address that, but certainly online students as graduate students as well. So, all right. So final thoughts. Last slide there. So Senate Forum. So next Wednesday, or 2 weeks from now, 11/20. I'm still sad about this, but we have a provost search going on. And so we're going to talk about that. The search committee has been convened, and we will be taking input and also describing the process. There's also several other things happening. So one of the unexpected challenges that I've been dealing with since I've started is committee rosters. And so that is one of my areas, is information science. And so what I've been doing is really pushing to automate the process and have one, or if not two, single points of failure. So I'm happy to say that I've been spending a little time with Google Sheets and doing a little programming. And so we now have one sheet, one form. And I'm working with the committee chairs and the representative of the elections committee to work through that one form because email is not our friend when it comes to updates in committees. So we are moving fast away from that. So I want to assure you that we are doing that quickly. Election guidelines. So through the constitutional change, I will be reaching out to the election officers. Please remind everyone outside of CAS that the election guidelines are due this Friday. And then I want to thank everyone involved in this meeting. I want to thank all of you for attending and all of your work. I actually do have lunch with the chair of the Board of Trustees as part of our push to have more faculty representation. I want to thank the provost and the chancellor for also supporting that effort. I also want to thank James and my doppelganger there, Anthony, back there, this whole group here, Andrea, Brad, and Casey. You're probably aware of how much work goes into putting together a meeting like this, and it couldn't really occur like this without everybody's help. So anyway, with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn? Yes, second? Second. All right. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All right. I'm not even going to ask for nays. Thank you very much. Have a good day.